This video is brought to you by Brilliant. On Sunday, Catalonia went to the polls to elect its regional parliament. Going into the election, the big question was whether pro-independence parties would be able to collectively garner a majority. But as of Monday morning, it looks like a strong showing from Spain's two main parties, the Socialists and the People's Party, has denied them. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Sunday's results, what this means for Catalan independence, and whether this means that Spain is quietly returning to a two-party system.
Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos.
So to understand why these elections are so important to Spain's national politics, you need a bit of context. Like many other European countries, for most of its democratic history, Spain's politics was dominated by two establishment parties, the Socialists on the left and the People's Party on the right. Together, these two parties would usually get between 70 and 80% of the popular vote. And one party would usually win enough seats in the Spanish legislature to either form an outright majority government or a functioning minority government, i.e. a minority government that occasionally relies on other smaller parties to pass legislation, but where all ministers are from the winning party. However, Spanish politics became significantly more volatile and contentious in the 2010s, mainly thanks to the Eurozone crisis. Spain was particularly affected by the crisis, largely because it was accompanied by an enormous housing crash. In part because other European banks, especially German banks, had invested tons of money in Spanish property, Spanish house prices essentially doubled between 2004 and 2008. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, money stopped flowing into the Spanish property market, and prices started falling. This was then exacerbated by the Eurozone crisis in the 2010s, which put serious strain on Spain's national finances and stunted the European economy more widely. For most of the 2010s, Spain suffered with appallingly high unemployment, crippling austerity, and stagnant growth. All in all, this meant that Spain endured basically a decade of economic turmoil, which had a destabilizing effect on its politics, manifest as an upsurge in anti-establishment sentiment. Many Spanish voters apparently blamed the two main parties for failing to deal with the crisis, or decided that they needed a more radical politics to get Spain out of its long-running economic rut. Widespread dissatisfaction with the two-party system helped fuel the rise of a new right-wing populist party called Vox, who sort of usurped the anti-Catalan separatist Citizens Party in the late 2010s, a new left-wing populist party called Podemos, and separatist parties in both Catalonia and the Basque Country. This trend becomes evident if you just look at the evolution of the joint vote share of the two main parties in the 2010s. In 2008, the last election before the crisis, the two main parties got 84% of the popular vote. But in 2011, this fell to 74%, and in 2015, it fell to 51%. Neither party was able to form a functioning government, which meant more elections a year later, where the two main parties did slightly better just because voters were apparently desperate for political stability. But the trend resumed at the April 2019 general election, when the two main parties won just 45% of the vote, with the People's Party winning just 16.7%. After the election, neither party was able to form a government, which meant another set of elections just a few months later, in November 2019. The Socialists won a plurality and formed a coalition government with Podemos, the first multi-party cabinet in the Spanish democratic era. Whilst the two main parties did better at the 2023 elections, winning a total of 65% of the vote, neither party was able to form a stable majority government, which meant that, as you might already know, Sanchez had to rely on support from separatist parties to govern. You get the idea. The economic turmoil of the 2010s undermined Spain's two-party system and induced a fragmentation of its political landscape, which has made it significantly more difficult for both the Socialists and the People's Party to form functioning governments. Now, sometimes political theorists argue that pluralities and coalitions are good because they encourage a more consensus-based politics and better relations between parties, but that's not what happened in Spain. If anything, it's made Spanish politics nastier and more polarised, because voters on the left accuse the People's Party of sympathising with the far right and Vox, while those on the right accuse the Socialists of cozying up to separatists and undermining Spain's territorial integrity. The prominence of separatist parties has also created a new fissure in Spanish politics, between what we might describe as hardliners who wanted to crack down on separatism by jailing pro-separatist politicians and centralising power in Madrid, and the moderates who want to instead try to assuage or placate the separatists with promises of ever greater devolution, and argue that crackdowns are only temporary solutions that just fuel further regional resentment in the long term. Anyway, this is why this weekend's elections in Catalonia were so important for Spain's national politics. At the last Catalan regional elections in 2021, pro-independence parties collectively won a slight majority in Catalonia's 135-seat parliament. These elections were triggered when the Catalan parliament failed to pass a budget in March, and the big question was whether the pro-independence bloc would be able to win yet another collective majority. In the end, however, that's not what happened. Pro-separatist parties fell short of the 68 seats required to form a coalition government for the first time in over a decade, thanks in large part to the fact that the Socialists won 28% of the popular vote and 42 seats, making them by far and away the largest party. This is a great result for both the Socialists and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who's been having a tough time recently, and Salvador Illa, leader of the Socialist Catalan wing, told his supporters late on Sunday that he expected to be Catalonia's next president.
One of the most important and relevant factors has been the policies of the Spanish government, and in particular of Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez.
This could also spell the end for renowned Catalan separatist Carles Puigdemont, who pledged to leave politics if he was not elected regional president. Now, while the headlines have understandably focused on the Socialist success here, it's also worth noting that the People's Party did significantly better than last time around, with their seat tally rising from 3 to 15, their best result since 2012. You can probably see where we're going with this, but the reason this is interesting is that it's tentative evidence to suggest that Spain's two-party duopoly is quietly reasserting itself, which would probably be good for political stability in Spain. In a sense, this should be unsurprising. Spain has mostly recovered from the economic turmoil of the 2010s, and Spanish voters have probably had enough of the chaos that's beset Spanish politics for the last few years. If this does happen, Catalan independence is unlikely to survive, given that Catalan parties won't have as much leverage in the national parliament, and Spain's relatively strong economy won't provide as much fuel for anti-establishment politics, especially if Puigdemont isn't around to capitalise on it. Ultimately, underpinning this topic is a lot of data, whether that's economics, trade patterns, polling, or demographics. And a lot of the time in politics, you just have to understand the data. So if you want to get a better grasp on these things, I'd recommend Brilliant. They've just introduced a whole bunch of new data courses, which are perfect for learners of any level, taking you through everything from Bayes' theorem to multiple linear regression. It even uses real datasets from the likes of Starbucks, X, and Spotify to bring things to life. I'm not even a super mathematical person, and I still found it easy and enjoyable to work through. That's because of how Brilliant is designed. Built around learning by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in maths, data analysis, programming, and AI. The good thing is that, like I said, you can learn all of these things quickly and easily, because Brilliant's courses are split into easy-to-digest chunks. Brilliant helps you build real knowledge in minutes a day, with fun lessons you can do wherever you have time, replacing mindless scrolling on the train or waiting for coffee with something actually stimulating and rewarding. So get learning across all kinds of STEM subjects for free for a full 30 days by clicking the link in the description. That way, you'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, and they'll know that you came from us, which really helps us out.